know what I'm talking about. Hello, everybody, and we are now live. Welcome to IndieWebCamp New Haven. This is our session on ungrading the critical gradebook, thinking about ways that we can use web mentions, for example, maybe to track knowledge growth. And then we have somebody new here for the first time, Brian, who's been working on his own, what's it called, Hex? I'll give you a second to introduce what you've been working on a little later. I apologize for mixing up the name off the top of my head. I just couldn't remember. And then we're joined by Chris Aldrich, who has taken and co-taught a class with me as a volunteer because he has nothing better to do in LA in the summer. I guess you have to stay inside because it's hot or something. I don't know. And then Jack Jameson, who is working on his PhD. This session was inspired by Ken Bauer, who cannot be here, and Laura Gibbs, who better known as Online Course Lady. And this whole idea around ungrading, coming up with different rubrics, different ways to assess knowledge growth in IndieWeb blog-driven DOO classes. And that's kind of the point of the session. So I wanted to share a little bit of what I'm doing in terms of what can be your options for grading, and then we'll get into a general consensus. So I have been fooling around with a couple things. I'm going to share my screen real fast.
We're completely skipping over the question of is it appropriate or worthwhile to grade in the first place?
Well, no, that is the point. That's going to be, that's what we're supposed to leave with. But I'm going to show 3 traditional grading methods for us to even debate that question. And that's what, when I said the word ungrading, maybe I should, when we talk about not using jargon. Jargon is that word, ungrading is that kind of that phrase of like maybe not everything does need to be assessed. But at the same time, Chris, this is where I go back and forth. And I talked to Sean Michael Morris and about this all the time. Like, because they're always like, no, nothing should have objectives. But I'm like, but if I'm teaching to build a website, I do know if you use headers, it's probably easier to, like, there's certain, I can identify markers of success. And I can parse for markers of success. So should I not measure your growth? Like, if I'm teaching a first aid merit badge, I want to know that you can put on a bandage correctly. Because, well, that's, like, important. Like, that's a clear, you can have an objective, like, knows how to apply a tourniquet correctly, or you cannot have that objective and they can do a tourniquet and someone loses a leg. So I go back and forth, and I think it goes back to goals. But yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Is there an Etherpad going?
Yeah, I've got one, and I'm taking some notes.
All right, perfect. So let me share my screen first and just share some general, just 2 different methods that I've been talking about. And there's also the institutional pressure. I may not need to grade, but I have to grade. Or I may not want to grade, but I need to grade, I guess I should say. Like I have to present a grade. So they make me. I've tried not to, and it's even the cultural pressure from the students and being like, well, what do you mean I don't have a grade? It takes a while. There's some anxiety around ungrading for students because they've grown up in a GPA world. So the first thing I'm going to start showing is EDU 405. Are you guys looking at my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
All right, good, because I have like 100 menu windows open. I'm going to make sure I'm sharing the right one. Why can't I remember my own websites, guys? Oh, because it's 407. Or it's not, I can't remember my own schedule. So one way that I have been fooling around with assessment is with the web mention badging. And as a quick background into badges, going super fast, Open Badges started in 2011 with Mozilla. And it existed there till about 2015-ish. A lot of the Open Badges team moved on. Mozilla handed off the Open Badges spec to IMS Global, which is a members-only standards board. So if you want to contribute, you need to pay. I shouldn't say you should belong, right? Because it does cost money and time to keep standards going. But it went from being a community-developed standard under, and then they handed off Mozilla Backpack to Concentric Sky and the Badger team, and I absolutely love that team. And their principles are, I don't mind using their products because their privacy and principles align with me, but it is still a third party I don't own. And I've also dealt with my badges being moved from Mozilla this to IMS Global. It's been like a mess. And the open badge, there's a lot in there that I don't think needs to be in there. I think it's a bigger spec that needs to be, when basically all I'm saying is, here's a link that says the criteria, and here's the link from the learner with their name and a link to the evidence. And that's all you need. So I've been working on this web mentions badges thing for about a year now, hard to believe actually. So here's an example page where every student then sees a badge, and there's a link to their WordPress site, which is an H card, a link to the badge itself, a link to the module with the criteria, and a link to the to the evidence. And then if you look at the source code real fast, this will probably load my code real fast. Is, what I do is, to save myself time, is I just made one badge list for this is an MVP. Like normally I would want this to be a system, not like just static files for now. But what I do is put the badges in, and then let me go to another one, a later one, because I get better as I go. I have every single student in here, and then I just comment out. If they don't earn it, I comment them out, and when they earn it, I comment them back in. And I'm going to stop doing that way. But yeah, you guys get the point. But the cool thing is, if I throw this into a parser, it parses pretty. I get my criteria, evidence, the photo of the badge, the URLs to where they go, and then each person's, here's the issuers by author, here's the author's H card, here was in reply to the earner, and then here's the entry where it gives me the criteria and it gives me the evidence, and I have a link to the evidence. So, but my thing is, now that I don't have that gradebook consumer, and I also want to think about, let me unshare my screen. Oh, I'll show you the other thing that I'm working on too, actually. That's how can I ungrade and have still a little bit of feedback attached to it? And I do still have criteria. So I do have objectives involved in my assessments because there's criteria. I'm also fooling around with building in rubrics. And I'm very anti-rubric lately, like rubricing everything. But I'm doing it because I need to teach my kids rubrics, and I've only finished one of them. And let me unshare my screen fast. To get through a little educational jargon, there's 3 basic rubric types. There's the one with multiple domains, scales, and indicators. So you're graded, like, if you think of a tree, it's, you have A, B, and C. And under A, you could have 4 indicators. And under an indicator, you could have some attributes. B, you could have 4 indicators. And every indicator and every domain can have a score, and then every score can have a score. So that's the most complicated of all rubrics, and they're usually the most useless for learning because, well, like this is, if I show you, for example, why aren't you showing in another window? Oh. Open in another window, a tab that I lost. This is my problem with having too many tabs in Windows. Sorry, guys. And I have this on my website too, but I use this on my students. I use Glitch kind of as like a way to just mess around and see things quickly. Rubrics. All right, show. So here's the first one. So this first one, this is just one domain. This domain then has an indicator. That indicator then has 4 attributes. And that attribute is then broken up into scales, below standard, developing, proficient, exemplary.
We can't see your screen, by the way.
Oh, okay.
You quit sharing.
I'll reshare. Application window.
But you're so excited about talking about it.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm excited about talking about how useless it is. But if you think about it, so this is just one indicator under 4 domains. One domain would have 4 of these indicators, and each one of those indicators is then broken into 4 attributes. And then each one of those, so what you do is you don't score at the attribute level, because an indicator is made up of multiple attributes. You score at the indicator level, and then at the domain level, and then in an overall level. But if you're a 5th grader, I mean, even if you're a 45-year-old teacher, and this is the Connecticut rubric to grade teachers. That's a massive number of squares. I think it comes out to something like 72 when you do the whole rubric. That's not a good growth tool, in my opinion. And there's other kinds of rubrics, and I haven't built, this is going to be maybe my hack project, but there's other kinds of rubrics that are holistic, meaning it's just a single domain with multiple scales. Like, so it would, if this is a 3, this might be organization, this might be quality, and this might be the images you use. And then a 2, organization. So it's all of the domains under the scale, and you're just circling an overall number. It's a 3, 2, or a 1. And then you have your, badges is kind of like almost a binary scale. You either make the criteria or you don't. And then there's the whole general just reflect out loud version of learning, which is what I've always used. And what many people is like, reflection should be our best path to measurement, to growth knowledge. So I'm going to stop there. That's kind of my thinking. I will say the rubrics are set up as H reviews. And with microformats, you can do nested H reviews quite well, depending on which parser, different parsers handle, because there is really no consumers, so it doesn't really even matter. I'm just doing it for fun right now. But like my gradebook, my student teacher dashboard, like I want to make those consumers because, and I want to start thinking long-term, like smart tutorial bots. So for example, I know what, I've taken enough people from never blogging before to blogging for 3 years. Like at some point, they go from writing that one single paragraph to writing long pieces. And I'm like, you should start inserting headers. But I should be able to do the regression analysis to figure out the growth curves in Learn. I'm getting way too mathy, sorry. I should be able to figure out growth curves of knowing at one point does the use of headers indicate a successful blog post, and then there could be a chat bot that connected to this gradebook that says, oh hey, you've been writing a ton but you're not using headers, would you like to learn how? So thinking about gradebooks that way, and thinking about these are all tools I can't build. There are no consumers, and I know people like we get our hand slapped for building things that don't have consumers, but I want this idea of what Ken Bauer's talking about with the critical gradebook to kind of be that consumer. So,
or if you build it, they will come.
Yeah,
I've never understood why people are critical of people who build things that don't have consumers. If you don't publish something, how would anybody bother to want to consume it?
Well, did you publish something if it isn't a consumer, or did you just?
Well, no, did you publish something in the hopes that somebody would start consuming?
Yeah.
If you learn to consume something and nobody's publishing it, or you publish something and nobody's consuming it, you're being aspirational.
I think
so. I started before I think it existed. I think I started publishing read posts, and then they moved into post kinds, and then a few months later, David got around to adding it to semantic linkbacks to consume it. And WordPress is one of the few places that does consume it, but I've noticed a handful of other people, and it may fall into the cracks of the post type discovery algorithm, that if I say it's a read post, but post type discovery doesn't find it, it automatically defaults it to a bookmark. So a bunch of sites use that as the fallback of they consume it, but they consume it in a fallback position of it's not a read post, it's just a plain bookmark. So everything I read on Jeremy Keith's site, I can post, but he lists it in his comment section as the fact that I've bookmarked it, which in some sense is really what it is anyway. Mm-hmm. It's a bookmark with extra semantic meaning, but.
And I'm going to just share my screen again real fast, because Chris brings up a very interesting point that has direct kind of, which one is that? Has direct, oh, now I don't even know which window I shared. I have too many windows open. I'm going to stop sharing. But I'll just talk. So Chris and I, for Brian who doesn't know, we did a class this summer called EDU 522, and I set it up, all my instructional design, I try to keep it simple as my web design. It's 3 things. You read, you write, you participate. And this idea of what Chris is talking about with the read posts, it's module 1. Everybody's a read post. And what they do is they have to grab a couple block quotes, do some annotations, and then they submit that post. that should be easy for me to quantify. And I could do it in InnoReader. I wish Laura Gibbs was here, because what she has built in InnoReader as kind of we're using her filters does this in a way. Because I could do it in InnoReader, where I'd say, all right, the hard part is teaching my children to tag. Children, not children are older than me, my students, to tag that, because then they'd have to say this is a module 1 tag, but they would set it up as a read post type, which is fine. It was just, but I can maybe date range that in my gradebook so that they don't have to do anything. Like I need the gradebook to work without them having, any times I have to rely on humans to tag, something's going to go wrong. But with a read post, Brian, what I would love to say is 10 people, 9 of them right in my gradebook, module 1, who submitted a read post where it's the hyperlink. And then I want to be able to reply, like thinking of Indigenous as kind of a gradebook version of Indigenous, say. For Brian who doesn't know, Indigenous is a Micropub client that's also a Microsim Reader. So I can read all my student writing in one place, and then I can comment from them all in the same exact place. Versus now I have their feed in InnoReader and my blog open in another tab. I read something, then I go back and send a reply post from my blog post. So it's a more of a unified environment, and I'm starting to really talk with Ben and Marcus about building this inside of Known and what it would be. Because Chris, I think we could have those read posts, and I could have the write posts. And so I'm just trying to think, like, what else do you think we could do for a critical grade?
And another thing you might try to do as well, in addition to the syllabus you've got. So there's been a bunch of people playing around in, who's it, Remy, I think, is doing the, annotate the syllabus type of thing. So, but some people are also having their students build their own syllabus and do some research to kind of figure out what is it you want to get out of this course, what do you want to learn, how far do you want to go. So there's the expectation that the teacher may have, and then there's expectations that the students have for themselves going into some courses. And obviously the lazy student just walks in the door and says, tell me what I have to know to pass the course, rather than I really want to take this for some particular reason and I want to get something out of it for my own self. And so in addition to your rubrics, what are they writing and creating on their own on day 1 or before day 1 of, I want to get X, Y, and Z out of this course, so that you can identify that and make sure it's covered in the syllabus, and have the flip side of that coin as well, because there are a bunch of teachers who are doing that kind of modality rather than here, I'm going to create all the stuff you're going to need to memorize to get out of my course. And find some happy middle ground.
The first post in every class is, what are my goals? But it's also like I teach in a very ill-defined domain. Like I was teaching Algebra 2. Like, do I let children say, what are your goals for algebra?
Yeah, that's the tough part, is if you don't know what your goal should be, because you literally are coming into its subject so cold.
Back on that word lazy a little bit, just because I never begrudge students who take the minimum path to resistance. They're almost trained that way through schooling. Like it's almost like we hone them in that they need the grade. And so the best path is, how do I get to the best grade with the least amount of effort? That is our educational system in a nutshell. Is how do I get my grade with and it's also like where I work at Southern, we don't have that many kids here because most work 2-3 jobs. Most it's a survival technique trying to finish school quickly. But it's like, yeah, just getting to that really deep learning. And I think we see it, IndieWeb in itself, not even as a grade book. Like I've talked about this whole idea of attentive learning when I'm comparing them to DS-106. And this idea, like, it is a goal-driven, but it's a shared goal. Like you're supposed to build for yourself, but you're also building for a larger community as you build for yourself.
Yeah. Well, there's the IndieWeb syllabus is called IndieMark in some sense.
Okay.
Here's a rubric for how you might grade your own website.
Put a link to that.
But at the same time, if having search functionality on your website does you no personal good, why build that first? Instead, go build something else that you know you're going to use every day. So, it's...
when I'm getting kids online for the first time, I know if they've been successful. Are they online? And that's a lot of anxiety. Just getting yourself online for the first time, not even just the code of just I'm out there.
That was the thing too for me, doing the 522 course with you. And part of the reason I did it in some sense was, I'm coming in way ahead of where everyone else is, but by participating separately from you as the professor, I'm able to, I'm the TA or the grad student who shows up and participates surreptitiously as an example for this is how this could be done in the richest possible way. How you do it as a student who doesn't know what I know may look different or sound different or be different, but at least by me being there with more knowledge and more information, I can be an example of how this can be done. And then you separately as the professor can say, hey, look at this, or if you can't do that, why don't you think about doing it this way? And but then there's discussion about what the example, a good example looks like, and then what that example could also look like in other incarnations. And I don't know if the other students got as much out of that by watching me be the example.
No, they did. They still talk about it a lot. One of them wants to come back and go teach the class with me, actually. And 3 of them are still being very active. And that's my really, when I talk about what is my ultimate major of success is I'm still using the blog a year later after class. Yeah. And it's usually about 2, out of 25.
Well, and it's also something that I tend to do with stuff that David builds. Mm-hmm. He'll build all this fabulous stuff, and some of the functionality may be hidden. It may not be documented. It may not be written about. And so people aren't going to know it's there. And it's hard enough to build it and write it in the first place, much less anything else. But I feel like, at least 1/3 of the people in the IndieWeb space and WordPress are watching, what is Chris doing with this thing David built? How is he using it?
Did you watch the keynote? That was Kimberly's exact word.
Yeah, and
she even connected it to David.
Post kinds?
No, just she says, how I build my website is I'm 2 weeks behind Chris Alder. That's her web design. She watches his site and then does that.
I'm behind him too.
But you build everything, but you're also ahead of him.
Well, no, in terms of volume.
Yeah.
And if I could just get him to actually update his installation.
Yeah, I need to do that this weekend.
Maybe. If you could get someone to get their installation on WordPress.org, you wouldn't have to update your installation.
No.
Okay. Why is it? And you automatically update your plugins, Chris?
Oh no, I manually everything. It's manual until it hurts.
And WordPress,
but now there's some customizations I've built into post kinds.
Los Angeles.
Oh, if what? If you update, he'll fly to you if you'll update the post kind.
Yeah, you can take me to Disney.
Oh, because you can make a child. Oh, because your customizations won't.
Yeah, I have forked the core, and so I have to go back and unfork some things and then build some infrastructure to support the stuff that I've previously built. And
I built you an infrastructure to do that. So
yeah, and David's he's even helped out. I just need to find the time to.
I wrote him a gist.
So, is my gradebook I'm thinking about? Is it just a Microsim Reader, or do I what is the tool that I need when I want to say I need to parse these 25 posts, but I need to quantify that data and then display that data in site C. So I need to take sites A through T, parse them, quantify that, and then show the results on site U.
Well, are you automating the grading, or are you still doing it in a, hey, I read your post, here's your result?
For now, it's all manual until it hurts because there's no other system, and I do need to read all the posts and write. I'm the halfway through, they start applying for the badges, and they write a reflection post where they're saying, this is how I met the criteria. Here's the post with the evidence. This is why, this is proof that it meets the criteria. And they'll write a reflection post, and that's what I give the badge to. But I don't start that till halfway through the semester because hey, you need to sign up for WordPress. You need to now install this custom theme. This is how now go to bridging. Like there's so much to do. Like I don't want to get to the second half of the semester without making our heads explode already.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I can't build that, but that's what I'm kind of thinking. I don't know if it is the Microsim Reader I'm talking about or a different tool that doesn't even exist yet.
Well, I think a reader can help you do that. But if you've got a page pre-built with, all the students' data and setup so that you only need to go in and comment out bits that say, hey, I read their post and here's the post that gives the evidence, and then it automatically, when you republish that page, it sends their web mention with their badge.
Yeah.
Maybe the easiest way to do it rather than doing it one at a time.
And that's
because
kind
you
of
can also create a badge post kind.
Yeah. Well, and
that's
really what I'm doing. I'm experimenting with criterion evidence. It's just an H entry, and actually it's a collection. Each badge, because it was just about saving my own time. Every badge is an H entry, so a collection of badges.
Yeah.
So each badge is a child badge. And Brian, I'm sorry if this is a little unfamiliar with you, but it's probably very similar to the linked data work that you've been doing with Hex. Do you want to talk about what you build a little bit? You don't have to mute your camera. Oh, you got out of bed, so you can.
I'm in bed. I love my
just
here. No, I'm
cool.
Sitting back and listening. So you have students that they set up WordPress blogs effectively.
It's different levels. I'm taking some kids who have literally never been online in their entire life. I mean, you've had the same students, I'm sure. They've never even written a hyperlink ever because they've never had a teacher who's written a hyperlink.
Mm-hmm.
Because we never considered it literacy. And so those I do start at WordPress.com. My grad students, they get shared hosting, and they can pick whatever process they want. I only support them in WordPress.org or in Known, just because I need to limit the amount of time of my customer support.
Yeah, you're trying to normalize their experience of content to get it all normalized back to you.
Yeah, well, I'd say, you want to do Drupal, go ahead. Just I'm not telling you how to do it. You have to go learn yourself.
So then are they, because you mentioned the tagging, if they don't have a normalized tag structure, that would then screw everything up. Is there any thought to, like, could your site have almost, I love surveillance state technology, as I'm sure you do, but is there any type of behavior like that you could leverage where, like, when they want to submit assignment 1 or whatever, that they've actually copied a snippet of something from your site and embedded it in the post, and it's almost like a reverse tracking pixel type of thing?
It works perfectly, not on WordPress.com. It works perfectly on WordPress.org, because then it's just, what I have them do is everything is just a uReply to the module page. So anytime they just send a reply, everything they do is a reply to that module page. So it's awesome, because then I just get, like, here's the module page, and I don't display the web mentions because I don't know how to display web mentions yet. But when I log into WebMentions.io, I already have a Gradebook. It's WebMentions.io, because I log in and then I see all of the replies that were sent to Module 1. I see all of the read posts sent to Module 1, all of the write posts sent to Module 1. And really, I guess what I'm talking about is how to, like.
Each module itself can be, here's the tidbit of information you need to know and learn, and what you need to do. You need to read this thing and write some reply or create a video or a photo or whatever creation to prove that you've interacted with this module, learned the material, and done it. And then even at the bottom, you can have a commented out preset set of details with the badge for that module itself. And then as people reply to that module to say, hey, I read this, I did this, here's the assignment, you can then uncomment their URLs with the details of the participant name and the URL that they showed you proof that they've done it. And then when you republish that page, it sends a web mention back that then gives them the badge saying, hey, you finished this piece.
That's a good idea.
So then you've got one page with literally everything for that particular piece of content or module on it.
Yeah, which is exactly what I'm doing now. I just have never taught the class. So I build that one page one at a time because I've never taught the class. But like next time I teach this class, all the badges will be made.
And if you do that, I remember somebody had like was it almost an online course, and I think it was called something like 10 Days of Twitter, and it may be on the IndieWeb wiki, but essentially it was, you've just started Twitter and you want to learn how to use it, and they had kind of a list of, do these 15 things that are the 15 most common things that happen on Twitter. So on day 1, follow 10 people. On day 2, send a status update. Day 3, reply to 4 people. So you go through that, and each day you learn 2 new things about how to use Twitter, so that when you're done, and you're doing the same thing in your class, you're just doing it for a much bigger platform and range of details.
And I have an academic blogger pathway that's made up of it's one badge that's made up of multiple badges. And I'm not even attached to the badges ideas. So don't even I was actually known as a skeptic in the badging. I'm like, as soon as this gets institutionalized, it loses all. It's gonna suck if it gets institutionalized.
Yeah. But there was, for some reason, I want to say Alan Levine probably has done some kind of domains camp or subsection of something like that for a domain of one's own of, on day 1, sign up for an account and set up a WordPress instance and put your name in. And then day 2, you do, you create your first article. Day 3, you do a status update or whatever that is.
In terms of online teaching, those little daily challenges, and I stole this from DS 106, talk about improving engagement in community. Those little, having my daily challenges in my classes, those are that's always what my kids come back is, that was the best part of your class. Even though they weren't really, those weren't attached to the actual learning objectives. It was how I was teaching them little tech techniques.
Yeah.
That's what they always report back.
Well, the other subtle thing too is when you are sending web mentions back and forth about these things, you're creating online discussion, you're creating examples. So other students are seeing what their peers are doing. And by seeing that, they then have an impression of, I'm either ahead of or way behind the group because I haven't done those things, or I don't even know how to approach doing them. So it then,
go ahead.
So it gives you the peer pressure of, hey, I need to learn these things to be able to keep up with the rest of the group. And it also sends a tacit signal of, these are the people who already know how to do it, so I can ask those classmates, hey, how did you do that thing? Or I've been trying to do that, and I've run into these stumbling blocks. So you immediately know, okay, I can ask the professor, but I can go ask the 4 students who've already made those posts and already done that, so I know they know how to do it.
So now I really need to figure out how to display web mentions, because I'm already collecting all of that data. I just don't know how to, and I can even have a counter being like, oh, 6 out of 9 have submitted, who check out, there could be neat ways to display that info. And I was about to say, Hypothesis is a private group, makes a good ungrading gradebook, because I can indicate what I've been doing with my students is publicly praising on web mentions. And since they're on WordPress.com and all comments are moderated, if I need to give them critical feedback, I post a native comment that they don't publish.
Yeah.
And it's a good workflow, because I can then be super positive publicly on their web mention, but also be without sending them an email, although I usually send them an email too, because I am still in charge for them to learn.
Yeah.
But I would love not to send them an email. But I send them a private comment saying, hey, these are 3 issues you need to address before I can issue you the badge. You're missing X, Y, and Z. And so I'm kind of playing with private comments and public web mentions.
There's even, in the last few days, I've been posting things about Hypothesis in a general sense, and many of them are things I've known existed, but I haven't really tinkered around with much. But I'm specifically posting about them as a means of sending some subtle but tacit signals to push the Hypothesis side to better implement UI within their system for them. But I'm also doing it to get other people who I know are using Hypothesis and who are either following hashtags or or the people involved so that they are aware, oh, hey, these things exist. So I haven't read it yet because he just sent it a minute ago, and I've been more engaged here. But I used Aaron Davis and Ian as examples because I know people have highlighted or annotated things on their website. So I use them as examples of, hey, this is how this thing works. So there's an example of what you need to do and how you need to do it. But somebody else responded, I think a few minutes ago, saying, hey, when I do this on my website, nothing happens. And it's because specifically nobody's ever gone into Hypothesis and marked something on their website up.
Yeah, they just added JavaScript to add it probably the first time.
Well, no, and unless the way this thing worked, it was a search thing that will search your entire domain to find all the highlights and annotations on your entire site.
Oh,
so
you're using the H, they call it the H, which is going to
and John built a facet to do this, but it's not built into the product itself. So you have to know the side tool exists, and you have to then know how that side tool works to uncover it. And if you're in an academic setting like Aaron or Ian, chances are pretty decent at least one of your friends is on Hypothesis and highlighted something somewhere. So when you search for it, something pops up. And the guy who
talking back and forth.
Yeah. So there's somebody who reads my site and is interested. So he tinkered around and put his website in and said, it doesn't return anything for me. And I think what he doesn't know or realize, because he's not really an academic or a Hypothesis user, is, chances are pretty low that somebody's used Hypothesis on your website at all ever. So when you do a search for you, of course nothing's going to show up because there's nothing to show. But, if you go to the New York Times, suddenly you'll find, 500,000 things.
Said, if we map all of if we map their files to how we want microformats, he would help add the export tool. I've been using HTML export and just hand coding in the H entries later, but it's a lot of work.
No, well, there's that, but there's one or two pages I think that I'm gonna put the proper micro formats on as an example for him, and then sketch out how they could add web mentions so that when you highlight or annotate a page, it'll automatically send a web mention to the page itself.
We'll have to talk. I've done that. We have a whole GitHub that GitHub repo John and I have been sharing with marked up where I take annotations, and it's been like one that's been replied to, because you got to think, is it a reply to? Is it a reply with an image? It splits, but we've done a lot of this work already.
Okay.
And right on my page, Chris, actually, they're not listed there, but I have one link of just my annotations. I think just my HTML, but I have an H entry. I'll look for it, but I misspelled the URL. But I'll send you one. But I took his tool and added the micro formats to it already.
Send me that page, because I think that's what I was going to hack on tomorrow, was giving him a couple of minimal examples of what these things look like and how to at least do a minimal markup, so that essentially do the minimal markup the same way Kevin Marks did for Mastodon 2 years ago. So that Mastodon, even though it doesn't send or receive web mentions, has the markup so that you can manually force it to send web mentions on your own if you want.
You did frag mentions. I haven't gone far enough into setting up frag mentions yet, because I've always been a Hypothesis user and all my friends are Hypothesis, so it's like I already have I haven't played with frag mentions as much yet. But what I did was I took the export of Hypothesis and then did it as a frag mention. Like, what would be the correct move as an H entry and a frag mention?
Well, and it doesn't. The frag mention part is useful too, but it's going to be a while before somebody builds in a way to show them in, the way Medium.com does, let's say, in a margin or something, because that's a harder theme issue to cover versus doing those kind of replies and setups and showing them as just general comments.
I posted the link in chat, and you can put it on the wiki. It's just I misspelled the URL, and I'm feeling writing a redirect. But I guess I could just go quickly fix that. But I've sent that link out a bunch, so I need to.
Wait, in which chat? Which chat? Where?
The Hangouts chat. I don't have the wiki open right now. That's all.
Oh,
I mean,
okay. Yeah.
But this is set up to where, and the problem was, I think I wanted each reading to be its own H entry, and then have each H entry under that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, if I remember correctly, what I did here was I think I exported the HTML, then threw the HTML into Unmong to get the feeds. The problem was that the reply feeds you have to nest the reply feeds better with Unmong. I mean, it had more than Unmong could handle, basically.
Yeah.
I feel bad for Brian, who probably has no idea what any of this what we're talking about. But here's just the HTML export, Chris. I'll put this there too for you.
Oh, I know what that word is.
What?
HTML export. You got me looped back in.
Brian, you want to take a second and just tell people what you built? Because it is pretty cool.
I'm working on an editor, like a text, well, not text, I guess WYSIWYG editor. If you guys have heard of Gutenberg in WordPress land.
Oh dear.
It's the
we all throwing up in our mouth, but that's
yeah. So I would say you disabled it. So I view it as the death of open web as far as WordPress, and I think it's really going to start fracturing that community. I don't come from WordPress. I come from Drupal, and I've seen fractures in that community as a result of adopting corporate types of code bases on the back end. And so I see this on the front end with WordPress. But my project is hackstheweb.org, which is a headless editor. So imagine if you had Gutenberg, but it was open and it was platform agnostic.
I think it's HTX, like not hacking, but HTXA.
HAXTHEWEB.org.
Okay.
So on it is, I mean, if you want to detour, I don't want to derail what you guys are talking about.
We're about to jump up to the next session, but I think what you're building, you're at Penn State, you're building a headless text editor. I mean, it fits right into the conversation.
Yeah.
So well, here's where we can give you something that'll give you an even bigger bootstrap up to make this work with more places. So I'm curious if this is a headless editor, how do I use it with WordPress?
It has a plugin.
Or Drupal or 57 other things.
So there's plugins for Drupal 6, 7, 8, Backdrop, GraphCMS, WordPress. It also has its own backend. So there's a HackCMS, which just writes to flat files and reads off a JSON structure. So the hackstheweb.org website is actually built using Hacks, which I think it should be pretty damning that the Gutenberg documentation is written in Markdown files.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for the purposes of IndieWeb, I have no problem with Markdown, but like you're trying to then force upon other people an editing paradigm you wouldn't yourself adopt.
Yeah. So here's something that may be of huge value to you.
We're bashing Gutenberg. You can hop right in.
Within the IndieWeb community that has been hacking away at the same problem, but have created some standards to make it easier to do. So and you can go to the wiki, there's a page called Micropub that is a W3 spec. And essentially what it does is it splits that headless part into two things. You can have a client on one side that allows you to post all types of data that go to a website. But what you need is that plugin on the website to say, okay, I understand the data you're sending me, and I know what to do with that data and where to put it and how to display it. And so those two things are two pieces of the puzzle, and they dovetail together. But the problem for you as a developer is you now have to go out and understand and build for each CMS that exists on the planet a plugin so that plugin knows what to do with the data you're sending it. So what Micropub does is it flattens that problem out and makes it a set standard so that you can allow creators to go out and make any type of client they want that will send data in a specified format. And then every CMS can either have its own plugin to accept that data and then know what to do with it as a separate issue. So there are, I don't know, there's probably about 20 or 30 implementations for various CMSs already that support Micropub as a broad spec. And it also includes editing and deleting data as well, which is even more fun. So what's nice is if you can build your client and make it Micropub compatible, then without all the extra work to do all those other plugins, your editor and post setup will automatically work with 20 CMSs that support that spec, if that makes sense.
And you seem to be pretty familiar with the activity part spec, right, Brian? And it's heavy. It's like we think of it kind of like, and please, Jack or Chris, correct me if I say something totally wrong, or somebody somebody on IRC is saying Greg's being stupid. But basically, Micropub is Microsoft's the reading. So we kind of took like the two parts of activity pub. I didn't. Smarter people, way smarter people, took it and split it in. It wasn't they split activity pub. They went a different route. They said let's use very smaller, more granular, modular building blocks versus one, gigantic. Am I saying it right, Dave?
Well, we're still debating extensions. So the idea is there's a core set of functionalities that are very easy to implement. And on top of that, you could have your own personal extensions, ones that only you get. And the community develops extensions that if enough people adopt them, they become not a standard in themselves, but a standardized addition to the spec.
Oh, we are. Oh, wait a minute. I think somebody pinged me on Meta. Of course, Contact said for the launch template. I'm like, no, we forgot it.
I told them that.
We forgot. We're gonna get it in the morning. And I'll grab a picture of this too now. But I didn't mean somebody already did. All right, thank you. I think that was Chris by that smile. So yes,
it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I heard somebody say they were going to do something, so I smiled just in case. Wasn't me though.
Okay. There, maybe I just hit the button without it. So that's what. Yeah. So what you've been doing is many people we do headless WordPress in a way without realizing it, because a lot of people just write only from their Micropub clients and only read in their Microsim Reader. And really, their reader is also a Micropub client. So a lot of people are totally in WordPress without ever touching WordPress.
And I know somebody who's working on a reader built into WordPress. What's that guy's name?
I don't know. Is he here?
Yeah. Oh, that Jack Jameson character. Yeah, I remember him.
Oh yes, that guy.
Yeah. So I think you're on a very similar mission. So it's kind of fun to meet new people doing it in different ways. So I wanted to give you a shout out. And the reason Brian, who was it? I think it was Luke, Alan Luke, or trying to figure out who introduced us to Brian. He's like, who you need to talk to? You need to talk to this guy. And then I started talking to Brian, but this is where we are. But that looks like it's the end of this session. That's about an hour. I'm going to shut this one down and start the IndieWeb e-commerce. So if anybody's interested in learning about how to use H products and setting up a e-commerce store on static sites, going to cover that in a few of the ones that I built for nonprofits and artist communities. So I'm going to stop this and start going next, because there's people asking for some, I wouldn't say there was chaos, Dave. There was no chaos. We just forgot. But sorry. I have a high standard of chaos because I live in a chaos world. Sorry. As you can see by this total tangent on chaos, because I saw the
it was Deli Town, Jake. It was Deli Town.
All right. I'll start the next chat in like 2 seconds for everybody that's going to join us.
It was good to see you, Brian. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome to join the next one too. It'll be a new link in a second.